Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Pitch Black, starring Vin Diesel, Rhoda Mitchell, Cole Hauser, and Keith David, directed by David Toohey. Now, before I get into this, I'm kind of a newbie. I've seen this movie before, but I didn't see it in theaters because you're gonna probably guess this. I was a little too young for it at the time, and when it came out back in 2000, I was like maybe 9, maybe 10 years old when this movie came out. I think around 9 now that I think about it. But moving on. Um, but I have seen the next two more times than I can admit seeing this, and I don't remember the third film very well. I haven't seen it in a while. I think since it first came out on Blu-ray or something, I forget. But I am. Well, I don't know if I'm lately been a big Vin Diesel fan, but when I get to the Iron Giant, I will primarily know him from that film as the voice of the Iron Giant himself. So let's see how this goes, as well as the other two movies. Let's get into this. In outer space, as a space transport ship called Hunter Gradzner, I don't know if I said that right, please forgive me, led by a dead captain now taken over by Carolyn Fry, played by Rhoda Mitchell, along with navigator Greg Owens, take an emergency landing on a planet called New Mecca, which looks a hell of a lot like a desert, where the deadliest bloodthirsty creatures on the planet, I never get what they're called, so please forgive me for that, can eat any human. In this opening scene with the crash landing felt a tad bit weird in my opinion. After the crash land, we meet a cop named William J. Johns, played by Cole Hauser, along with a Muslim named Imam Abu al Walid. I don't know if I said that wrong. Please forgive me. Played by Keith David. Three Muslim boys, Al, Hassan, and Suleiman? Something like that, I forget. As well as an antique dealer, Paris P. Ogilvy, a stowaway teenager, Jack, who ran away from his parents, John Ezekiel, and his partner, Sharon Shaza Montgomery, along with their prisoner, Richard B. Riddick, played by Vin Diesel, who's a dangerous criminal murderer and feared monster because of his unusual eyes that can see in the dark. And honestly, I wish I had those eyes because in general, I can't see in the dark, but at the same time, he can't see in the light, but wears protective goggles. And I like Riddick as a character more than the other characters, as they felt stale. And honestly, Vin Diesel carries this movie more than the other cast members in this movie, in my opinion. While there were times the cinematography looked good, but other times it looked bad. And the way it was shot was just weird. And kind of CGI'd, well, that looked terrible. And remember, this was the year 2000 when this movie came out. One of the crew members shoots a deserter dead, believing it was Riddick, while Riddick escaped at one point on the first 25 minutes of the movie. And Zeke gets killed by Riddick, and he gets back to being a prisoner as he was blind, and Shaza knocks him out until Carolyn asks him about where the body is at, and he asks her to get closer to him to reveal his eyes, and he says they're going to be dead if they just sit there along with their ship, while Jack wants eyes like Riddick's and takes a liking to Riddick. And I don't believe in the dialogue they're saying, as it's written pretty badly. Carolyn almost gets stuck in the hole to look for Zeke, and the other crew members get her out, and she doesn't know what fucking trap she's in. And Johns negotiates with Riddick while pointing a gun at some chains and lets him go, and Riddick points the gun at him and helps the crew members out on their issue with their mission, and introduces himself to Ogilvy, and drinks his bottle of wine the whole way, which was hilarious in a bad way. Jack shaves his head to look like Riddick as he looks for a way into shelter, but John stops him and says he's missing the party. Come on, and Riddick, you're missing the party, come on. And Riddick finds Jack and mimics John's, which is incredibly fucking corny as hell, as this movie is fucking corny as hell. Ollie is killed by some flying creatures, and do I care? Absolutely not, as I don't know the character well, and I don't get to know any of these characters too well. Riddick says his famous line, "You're not afraid of the dark, are you?" Or let me just say it a little better than how I did. "You're not afraid of the dark, are you?" And if there were any actor saying the line, I can't do it justice, it would have come off terribly. but the way Vin Diesel says it is badass. And his acting is the best thing about the movie, and the acting comes off terrible while he comes off okay-ish, like adequate at best in this role. But when I get to the next movie, The Chronicles of Riddick, it doesn't turn out as good as I remembered, but I don't know about the third film, Riddick, because I don't remember that film too well. Meanwhile, Riddick comes off frightening Carolyn, and he decides to walk out of the cockpit, and Johns puts a needle near his eyeball, which scared the shit out of me. Carolyn asks Johns if there's anything to know about him, and he comes off like an asshole. And that was that shit in the needle. What was that shit in the needle? Like, he was putting in his eyeball, and that's what was fucking frightening to me to see. And they go back to the ship where they crashed at, as they almost abandoned Johns, but luckily get back together, and Olgavile gets something from another part of the broken ship as it goes dark, and when it gets dark, it feels suspenseful, but when it's dark, the suspense decides to go away. And that's not a good thing whatsoever. Shaza dies by the flying creatures, and Riddick sees an army of the creatures coming to them, and it gets dark to the point they have to turn on flashlights, who's from the creatures, while something almost kills Abul Al, or should I say, I forgot his fucking name already, and I don't fucking care. And John shoots it, and Riddick tortures it away, as Riddick tells Hassan to not move a muscle while the creature can't tell them, and the others shoot at one, and the crew have their weapons, and John tells everyone to sit tight, and the acting in these scenes do not scare me, but they more bored me to fucking death. They get out of the ship and realizing they can't stay there alive, as the creatures can find and see them at the one point. Jack almost escapes and breaks their lights, and I'm just going to say it now. What a stupid fucking character. While Olgavile is killed being surrounded by the creatures, which was in the trailer, and it didn't scare me then, it doesn't even scare me now. Johns acts like an asshole and tells everyone to keep moving, and these scenes are unfortunate to watch, as the acting is terrible in this movie. Absolutely terrible. Johns challenges Riddick in a fight that I don't necessarily care for, as Riddick can kill this motherfucker out as a creature does, and Riddick baits him to do so, as Jack says we should have stayed in the ship, which is cowardly enough as it is, and they keep going, and Abul Al chats with Riddick, and they get to some kind of canyon, and they hear creatures and run while Riddick is holding their missiles, and there's blue blood coming out of the creatures as they're killing each other, and Riddick's advice is to not look up while one of them is injured. Riddick runs with the missiles and comes back to the rescue for Jack, and eventually fights one off, as I'm not convinced as this piece of action is dull as the fight between Johns and Riddick. It starts to rain, and Riddick tells them they're not going to make it as one attacks the final kid, and they hide in a cave while Riddick takes the missiles to another ship, and Jack is worried that Riddick is not coming back to them. While in the cave, they find some blue creatures, and Riddick turns on the ship and almost abandons them, and Carolyn finds him almost ditching them, and they talk about survival instinct, and he asks Carolyn to come with him, and she says she can't leave them behind, and she almost leaves them until she jumps on Riddick, saying they can save them, and how she would die for them, and they grab the rest of the crew members and encounter some creatures and run aside from them, and they get on the ship while Riddick is encountered by one of the creatures, and the second one comes in between them, and Carolyn almost abandons Riddick until she finds him bleeding out and drags him to the ship, and Carolyn, along with Riddick, is suddenly stabbed, and he has no choice but to leave her while she gets killed, and they take off at first, but Riddick turns on the lights as the creatures see them in the ship, but he decides to take off anyways thanks to the light of fire, and the effects in space looked absolutely awful as they take off to another world this climax just bored me to death for some bad looking special effects. Now it's time for my rating. I'll give this movie a 3.9 out of 10. There were times the cinematography looked good, but at the same time it looked bad, and the movie was weird at times to the point I don't really like it. But I don't really like the characters except for Riddick, as Vin Diesel carries the movie more than any other cast member in my opinion, as the other characters felt stale, and the way it was shot just felt weird. I don't believe what the characters are saying, as the writing comes out pretty bad, as this movie is badly written and the performances were terrible in this movie. Absolutely terrible. Even from Vin Diesel, who, as hell, he doesn't memorize his lines at all. And what kind of an actor does come off as, I mean, really? I don't get to know these people too well, as the movie is corny as hell, as I remember the second one not being very good. I don't remember the third one very well, but if this goes on like this and by the third film, this is going to be another bumpy retrospective, but for now, this is a non-recommendation, and I'm in for another bumpy ride next time. So I'll be back next time with the Chronicles of Riddick, and until then, you're not afraid of the dark, are you?